Thank you so much for joining the show. This is Kathy for Getting Chatty with Kathy, and we have a wonderful guest on the show today. We have Her Honor, the Mayor, Sandra Masters.
Hi, Kathy.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I was so excited when you guys said you would join the show. I was like, this is going to be such a great conversation. In my lifetime, there has been one female mayor before you, and she, I believe, was for 1 year, just a really short term. And so you were the first, voted in full-term mayor.
Yeah, and so Doreen Hamilton, and I think it was actually a few months.
Oh, that's
so
it?
yeah, they appointed her. The council appointed her because she wasn't going to run for mayor. They appointed her when Mayor Archer stepped away to run in a different election. They appointed her while they held a by-election. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, congratulations, and you've had a very, very good last. Is it 4 years already?
Everyone keeps saying 4. No, it's been 3.5.
It goes quick.
It does.
It goes quick. So when you agreed to come on the show, I was very excited because a lot of us hear about what's going on in the news with the city and that sort of thing, but we don't get to kind of go a layer deeper with you. I heard you talk about, you were a young mom and you have always worked really hard to get where you're going. And I really admired that about you. So I was just curious if you could go back there and tell us where this fire for politics and everything like that came, because I think this would be a very interesting thing to hear.
So to every poli-sci student out there, I went into the College of Commerce at the University of Saskatchewan. I actually wanted an English degree, and I was a single mom. My daughter was 1.5 when I started university.
Oh my gosh.
And so I thought, oh my gosh, what if I get an English degree, and what job do I get with an English degree? And so I went into commerce because I thought, okay, I can get a job with that. But my electives were then English and poli-sci. So I liked political science even back then, the theory, the philosophy of it. And went out, got a job, did the things I did. I moved to Regina back in 1999 from Saskatoon, which is, I always find it comical because, that thing between Saskatoon and Regina.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're like,
the
you're moving
rivalry.
where? I'm moving to Regina. I'm moving to the capital city. And then, I ended up in commercial banking, commercial mortgages, underwrote commercial mortgages at Connexus Credit Union. But I had 4 kids, and so I started at university as a single mom, and I ended university with 3 kids. And I joke to my kids, it took me 5 years to get my 4-year degree, and my sons all looked at me and goes, "Yeah, it took us that long to get it without kids."
It took me a bit longer than that, and I didn't have any. You were amazing.
Yeah, and then I had one more after the year after graduation. So when I moved to Regina, I ended up at Connexus Credit Union. But 4 kids, and I was a single mom from about 2000 forward, and it was a great organization in that part of my annual review was volunteering. And so I got to volunteer with my kids. And so it was, whether you're the co-manager of one of the hockey teams or you're driving folks around, I ended up coaching volleyball. But my joke is, once you start volunteering, people know that you volunteer. Mm-hmm. And so I kept getting asked to volunteer, in addition to whatever else I was doing. So I can remember what my oldest son is, he's turning 30 actually on Saturday, but I can remember when he was transferring up to Saskatoon. He did 2 years at U of R. He was transferring up to Saskatoon, and I was on my knees digging in the dryer trying to find the sock, right? The other sock. And he stops and he looks down at me and he goes, "Mom, what are you going to do when we're all gone?" And I said, "Not this. I am not going to be doing this." But I kept volunteering, and so I kept getting asked, would you join this board? Would you join this committee or whatever? And so got interested in basically the city. And I tell people that raising 4 kids, it was really important to me to keep them involved in things. I was really involved in sports and other programs and student leadership and that kind of stuff. And so I always focused in on the ability for a single mom to have her kids participate in stuff. And again, understanding I was still privileged at that particular point in time in terms of, the job I had. But it was actually civic assets that enriched my kids' life. And 3 of my 4 kids don't live here, but I want them to be proud of the city they came from. And I actually want them to see that Regina is a place that they could raise their kids in. And so ended up we were talking about, just in different groups, talking about folks who were running for mayor. And at one particular point in time, someone said, "Maybe you should do it." And I'm like, okay, let's not talk crazy. And then 3 months later, it wasn't so crazy anymore.
I think it's really good. I think that having your voice representing the city is going to change things. I remember when you were elected in and you came guns blazing. You were like, we're going to do a lot of change. And it might have taken a bit longer, but that's the way things work. Like, it's not up to us always to make things go as fast as we want them to, but you've got that sports facility, that new park. Water,
Yeah.
It just got announced.
Yeah.
I was jumping for joy when you said that. Like, I was so worried that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and it really is about, I say that I was a little bit naive about how long you have to work at things. And so every time you see an announcement, just know that underneath the surface there was probably months, if not years worth.
I was going to say years.
Years worth of continual work. And then you hurry up and wait for other people to decide. Anyways, but there we go. That's a civic asset then when you think about a Winter City strategy. Having the ability for kids, number one, to be involved in programming, life-saving of swimming lessons.
Yeah.
But then the recreational side, that ability to take your kids and go hang out somewhere warm and go swimming in the winter, it's a really important thing for us here. And then there's the matter of sports tourism. The reality is they're not coming for the ocean and the mountains, as I say, here to Regina.
You're right.
Tourism is a significant contributor to our economy, and it's the events that we host. And it's not necessarily the Grey Cup events. Those are wonderful to do because it's nice to have that kind of national exposure. Every weekend it's the hockey tournaments. It's the regionals
Diving.
and the westerns. It's it's the water polo, and it's the connector in community because there's people around. You get to know other parents. You get to know coaches. You get to know other kids. You think about coming out of COVID and how we realized how important park space is. That gathering and that outdoor space, but also that indoor space, that ability to go out and be together as a family, be together as a community. It's a really big deal.
I like that we're trying to get more of a winter city going and trying to focus on some of that other stuff because winter is long here, and if we can have a nice, accessible things to do, it's wonderful.
Yes, yeah, that is the goal. I
love it. Now, where do you see Regina in 50 years?
Honestly, I think that the city of Regina, as well as the province of Saskatchewan as a whole, is it's you can feel it bubbling beneath the surface. People ask me how are things going, and I said I finally feel like a whole bunch of folks are kind of everything's rolling in the right, like in the same
seeds are
direction.
Planted.
The seeds are planted. Yeah, to use the agriculture, the gardening experience. Yeah, and it's you harvest or you
it takes time.
You seed, you weed, you sow, you harvest. But I think in 50 years, what you're going to see is a city that has outstanding educational institutions, like the opportunity to go to university, go to Sask Poly here, to go to First Nations University, SIIT. But in addition, I don't know how many people know this, but the University of Saskatchewan College of Medicine has 40 doctors being trained here now in the city as of last year. And so can we keep adding to that? Because we know when we train folks here,
they
stay, and we service Southern Saskatchewan. And so we serve, 500,000 or 600,000 people, even though the city's about 260,000 now. So in 50 years, I think what you're going to see is that families can afford to live here, but it's a place where you can educate, you can see your whole life here. I think the investment in cultural entities, whether that's the Globe Theatre or the Soundstage or Sask Arts Council, does unbelievable work, and it's important to people here. Longest running symphony, and so when you can have music and art and culture, that's kind of the spice, that flavor of life. I think you're going to see a really vibrant cultural community here that is known across the country, if not the world. And I think people can get good jobs here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is agribusiness, it is tourism, hosting those events. It's going to be the announcement at the Soundstage on Monday. What's going to happen here in terms of filming and the creation of that digital media? It will just continue to explode and feed on each other, which creates much more of a tech industry as well. So
I think it's really cool to think of it this way too. Like, as a mayor, you come in, you're taking over from somebody else that probably didn't have the same point of view as you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to then have to figure out what's important for you to get started, and then you have to let it grow.
Yeah.
So it's more than a 3.5 year thing. So your second term, we got to get her in so that you can keep this rolling, so that in 50 years we can have some of these things. Because if we keep on flipping people, none of the plans get made, and then we have half-ass plans.
Yeah, it honestly, there's the piece of cleanup too, because we are 100 and some year old. I'm not going to get the number right. 120-year-old city. And so there's pipes in the ground that are from 1913.
Oh, yes.
And so the expansion, even if, you've heard lots of talk about housing and housing availability. the reality is someone somewhere along the line put in 6-inch pipes and it needs to be 12 or 20. And so it's a methodical replacement for like that you're creating for density and growth and to serve industry, because you really do want to attract industry for the jobs and the future economy, essentially.
It's like juggling all these little things to figure out how to make people happy and have a job and all these other things. That's crazy. And when you started, I bet that few months before when somebody threw it out, you probably didn't even realize all the different avenues you were going to have to think about.
Yeah, it is. If you're a mental magpie, like if you like you picking up a whole bunch of rocks and moving in at the same time. Because someone asked me, does the job satisfy you personally
Love that question.
As someone who likes to drive change? And I said, yeah. And joke around, you go back to the rock pile, but you're moving boulders, and so you pick it up and maybe you get it 2 inches, maybe you get it 2 feet. But when that stalls because now you have to wait for somebody else, you literally have a whole bunch of other rocks to move. And so it's fascinating. I know way more about wastewater than I ever thought I ever would in my life. But it's a fascinating element to the basic service that cities provide. Essentially the life that cities support. It's crucial. It's probably the most important thing we do. And then you just layer in, if you call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you just layer in the stuff that makes life thoroughly enjoyable and fulfilling.
Well, and I think that when we had COVID, it's kind of stripped a few of those like things that made things enjoyable. And we also saw like a huge uptake in like drugs and stuff. And people were stuck in their houses. So you get violent. It's just like what happened for COVID and then moving out of it. It's like been really eye-awakening for a lot of people, I think, for like some of the people in the city that aren't as well off as others, and we saw it really, really in our faces.
Exacerbated during COVID. And so, so on multiple levels, because I reflect on this now, it's not that long ago that we were in a global pandemic, and I think people were so excited to get out of it that it's like, okay, we're back to normal yet yeah, you're not, because you're always you got to deal with what those 2 years were. So, you're right. That isolation, you know it intrinsically, whether you get your kids involved or you stay involved in things, you maintain those friendships. And when everybody's isolated, it does kind of blow up the reasons why all of those things are important. In terms of some of the fentanyl, the opioid use, and so I don't know how many people know this, but during COVID, the methamphetamine supply was restricted because the borders were shut down. So they weren't getting across the borders. And so basically crystal meth became in short supply, which is where you saw a big explosion in fentanyl.
Because they couldn't get meth.
Yeah, fentanyl is so easy to transport, so easy. Like when we see the crime statistics for when drugs were introduced into the city, fentanyl explodes and it's deadly. Yeah. Like it's scary. I always say it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And it's so easy to transport, it's so tiny, and it's really cheap. And that's where you saw this explosion of it, because people find ways to escape. And then as a result of those addictions, it creates, you're right, it creates intimate partner violence. It creates criminal activity, because you got to support that. And it
affects your family too.
Oh my gosh, family and friends. Like you can hear it from folks who have friends and families who have a substance use disorder, and then it disrupts your entire life, because is paying my rent the most important thing, or is this addiction the most important thing? And so that's a little bit of the explosion. And it's not a Regina phenomenon. It's not a Canada phenomenon. It's literally a worldwide phenomenon.
It's crazy. It's so sad, especially with like little kids. And you see on the news people when I was young, I tried and experimented and did all those things, but nothing was life-threatening, it felt like. But now it is.
Yeah, now it is. And so I can remember when my kids were teenagers, going to Sheldon Williams Collegiate. There you shout out for Sheldon. I can remember it was when crystal meth got introduced, and it was terrifying. And I'm good to be scared, to scare my own kids about. It's like, the addictive level of that drug was so terrifying. It's like, just don't do it. I understand pot, I understand alcohol, like I get those experimentations, but do not do this, and do not trust others with your life.
Yeah.
But But again, now you come back to isolation and people trying to escape and all those things. And so
it's a recipe for a disaster.
it is. We're now back to about 50-50. Like from a police commission perspective, I think we're back to meth and fentanyl being even. And it's so destructive. It is absolute desolation and destruction.
And honestly, with a lot of the education that I received, because I was very lucky, I went to the U of R and then I worked there for over a decade.
Oh, yeah.
So they gave us lots of training with like Indigenous culture, and the blanket exercise was a really big one that affected me.
Yeah.
So I don't blame people for wanting to like escape in
No,
like the
right.
rough style of life. Like, it makes sense to me that people would do that. It's just, how can we help people to have another choice? And I love that we're doing stuff with housing security. I think that's key. I think we need in my opinion, before you can get dealing with anything, you need to know that you can be safe.
Yeah, and it's a really a really important element. And if you look at the housing continuum, it is shelter space to independent living. And so for years we didn't have transitional housing. We have that now. We didn't have supportive housing. We have that now. And it's like you can't wave a wand and say, now we have 500 supportive housing units. And so, we started with 24, we've got another 20 coming on, we've got another 30. That's the supportive housing. That's 24/7 care on site. Wow. Then there's the transitional housing and domestic violence, individual, like their housing security around. That's a very specialized need. Bet. And then there's the ones with substance use issues. And so we've got expansion coming in the system for that as well. And then we have transitional housing. You think of Horse Dance Lodge, that was built 29 units. And so you have to be case managed to be there. It's not necessarily the same level of care as supportive housing, but someone's got your back. You think about kids that age out of care, they turn 18 and where do they go? And it's like you create these transitional housing where they get support, and maybe it's like they need transportation, or they need an outfit to go to a job interview. Maybe they need help getting into training. Maybe they need help with life skills. That kind of transitional housing is a big deal. There's another 30 units. There's 29 in Horse Dance Lodge, and another 30 units being built on Fifth Avenue in North Central right now.
Wonderful.
But when we look at this, and I've taken a lot of seminars, talked to a lot of people, and a big part of it is you have to manage what exists right now, but you can't spend all your resources and time there. You have to go to the kids, because it's the intervention,
education
in the grade 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s where you get them involved in activities. They have to know they're important. They have to have opportunity. They have to have hope. And so you got to figure out how to get there.
I think that's so key, is to like really think about like preventative care, even in our health system, to be honest with me. But like, anyways, I think that's wonderful that we're doing this for so many people in the city, but how can the funding go for there? And then how can like groups like, I'm part of like RWN and I'm part of like WESC, and like I find that a lot of us women want to help. I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know how to help. Like, I can't go to the food bank for 4 days out of the month to help because I got my kids at home. But maybe there's something that we could do for these communities that you could recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we're trying to figure out how to step away from duplication in the system. When you've got, it's called the peanut butter theory of investing, where you spread it really thin.
Okay.
As opposed to going deep into. And so when we started the Community Safety and Wellbeing entity, which is CSIR, Collective and Social, Community and Social Impact Regina, their job is to focus that we said, okay, you're going to focus on these 6 areas, right? You're going to focus on these 6 areas. And so even them as a startup municipal corporation are going, you can't do all 6 at the same time. You actually have to focus.
Traction.
And so it's the deep dives in terms of the organizations. We look to the organizations that have been around a long time, right? Whether that's Regina Treaty Status Indian Services, whether it's OIWCA, the food bank's been around a long time, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. There's organizations that have been around a long time. It's interesting because they've all talked about, we know that collaboration, we held community action teams, we know that collaboration amongst these organizations is, okay, you're doing that, I'll refer this to you. Food security, everybody uses food to build relationships, but there's some organizations that are deeply involved in the supply of food. Like, the food bank's definitely the biggest in that regard, and they supply a whole bunch of other organizations as well. So when folks want to help, a lot of the organizations. Sometimes that's just a phone call. We've talked about creating a community list, and so we know X organization needs an 11-passenger van. We know this organization needs coats and toques and whatever. We know this organization, and so it's kind of in the early phases, but really just a running list of, hey, if you've got, and sometimes it's volunteering. Sometimes it's as simple as, we working with North Central Community Association. We want to go in and help with the cleanup.
Is this the young kids that are working on that?
North Central Strong Kids.
Oh, this is like where education from a young age grows to like this amazing, because who's going to listen to these kids? Their community.
Yeah, and they want, so Brian Lewis is a teacher and educator he's an educator at Scott Collegiate. 10 years ago, he started a program where he knew these kids needed a part-time job. It's important. And so he started employing the high school students to play after school, an after-school program with little ones. And they call them the little ones. And so from 6 to 14, these kids can come and hang out. And they can do sports, they can do space camps, they can do cultural activities. And so these kids get a part-time job. He's got an 88% graduation rate of the kids that participate, high school kids that participate. And these kids are graduating against the odds.
I think right now we don't even have 50% of our graduation rate.
No. And so what he's doing, and so there's a program that's been around 10 years. We've partnered with him at Mamawa Atherton Center at Scott Collegiate. We asked him, I went and we were working on stuff in North Central because from a city perspective, it is just out of hand when you've got 177 boarded up properties. That is just like not doing your job.
Right.
But when folks are I won't say limited to the community, but in some respects their resources are centered in their community because it's
transport, whatever.
Yeah, whether it's transportation or jobs or whatever. And so the sidewalks become more important, bike lanes become more important, safety at intersections because of the way people move. Lighting is massively important. So we sat down with these kids and we said, this is what we're looking at. We were looking originally at housing and neighborhood cleanup and investment. And so we said, would you be willing to hang out with us? We'll pay you to be here. You're going to be our advisory committee. And so they started meeting with us monthly, and they're just these phenomenal kids. They've all graduated now, but because they were in this mentorship program, we get to continue working with the Growing Young Movers program. And so having these kids show up and number one, exposing them, really being youth-centered. And their driving kind of, initiative, I think, in some respects, is they were the ones mentoring the 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds. And so we're like, 20 years from now, what do you want these 26-year-olds to experience? And so that's a little bit of where it's coming. And so we tease them all the time. Like, do you think that, we knocked down 43 boarded up properties in North Central last year? I
got goosebumps when you said that.
More than we've ever done. But now we got to go to infill. And so how do you figure out the programming? So that's partly my job because that's a whole bunch of lobbying. But in terms of them, they're like, they want public art. They want cultural programs. They want Mama Atherton Center activated.
Oh, I love this.
They want that hope. And when we asked them, they go, why are you here? We went through this before they presented to council. Why are you here? And they said, we want North Central people to be proud of living from North Central. We're proud that we graduated from Scott Collegiate. But they recognize the barriers are both ways. It's out into the city, but it's also the city into North Central. And so really working on everything from beautification to safety to opportunity to having the amenities that they need in that neighborhood.
Well, a testament to a community is how the less privileged, like the least privileged, are treated. So if we can treat everybody to a very nice standard of living, what a wonderful thing to have for your city.
Yeah, and you get a better understanding of the barriers, and sometimes the barriers are ridiculous. You're like, really? That's the issue? Oh, well, we can do that. We can fix that. Or their experience living there is, like, we can fix this. So they're working on a park revitalization, which will require investment from the city. But actually to have a gathering place that everybody's super proud of and
bought into,
and everything from, we should create free Wi-Fi because parents and kids will come out to access that free Wi-Fi.
You're hearing from the grassroots what 100%. You need.
Yeah.
So it's not just a blanket, like, let's give you
I'll
money.
decide. I won't. Like, it's.
I love that. You're listening to the community for what they want.
Yeah.
That's the type of leadership that's going to change things here.
Yeah, but it does take a while.
It does.
Because it's based in relationship. You have to build the relationships.
Well, when I worked at the city for a little while, and I worked at the university as well, and bureaucracy at its finest, like, you can have an idea that you think, this semester I need to have it out. It's so good. This is going to get so many more students. This is how my head would work. And then all of a sudden it's like, but we got to get it approved. We got to change this thing. Well, you know what, we decided this. So these great ideas sometimes get delayed. So the fruition of them, we need to cultivate still.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, It was interesting when you got elected because I didn't really know like much about you, and I was optimistic to see what was going to happen with the city. And then there was all of that noise going on about so many different things. So to have you here today to kind of outline where you're going and what you see and what you want, it's like inspiring. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like there's going to be in the next 4 years, there's a lot of movement in the future, do you think?
I think way more of the rocks get moved. That's what I think.
Way more rocks.
Way more rocks get moved. Because if you think about it, because people talk, I'll pick a topic that's been outstanding. The yards. Yards is, as Lisa Gibbons, executive director of Warehouse, says, oh, you like my dirt pile or my dust bowl or whatever. But she's right. But without Dewdney Avenue infrastructure, like digging up the road, putting in the pipes, it had no water and wastewater. And so I can't tell you why that wasn't done 10 years ago, but I know that it needs to be done in order to trigger any type of development there. And so that's now done. Now you create opportunity on the yards. You're going to build on the old Taylor Field lands adjacent to the Lawson. You're going to build this indoor aquatic center and geothermal, which is very cool and will create opportunity for university, for the PTRC, for the city of Regina, and for potentially other buildings using this technology. But now you've got an activation site that will draw 600,000 visits. And so what goes around it now, like you can continue, you can see the hope for this and this, you can build it out. And all of a sudden you've populated and created connection between your downtown, your warehouse district, your Taylor Field lands, and, you know, Mosaic Stadiums and those cooperative centers and affinity plex for this is what we're about. We're about
energy.
Yeah, it's sport, rec, entertainment, and culture, which is the heart of a city.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of, when you step up 1,000 feet, you can kind of see how it sort of comes together. And then, you know, you've got, I think going forward, you're going to see that the things that have been percolating under the surface, like I said, I got a whole bunch of people moving in the right direction. You're going to see an expansion in the service to, you know, marginalized individuals, and the city leads that in advocacy. And I say we play around the edges because you got to be careful. But when we invest, we find others invest, and so that's going to continue to expand. I think the culture economy, as they call it, with the soundstage and with what the University of Regina does and what Globe Theatre does and the RSO and these other venues that we have that create live music and art, Mackenzie Art Gallery. So library, actually, community hub downtown, it's underway. And so you can see it start to kind of, where it all starts to flesh out. And I always say it's like kinetic energy. Opportunity and energy creates more opportunity and energy. And I am energized by people because I couldn't figure out how to answer the question, how are you doing? Because people, you know, you read the news, a little bit of clickbait sometimes, but you read the news or you read, oh my gosh, and then there's this challenge and then there's this challenge. And so I used to, the first 6 months probably my mouth just hung open, a little bit of a fish stare. I don't know how to answer this question right now because I'm sort of overwhelmed. But now how I answer it is I said, number one, I'm awesome because I'm energized by people every day. But really, the answer is that I get great news every day. There is someone with a great idea who's pushing, and yeah, it might take you 2 years to reach it. Someone who's got a great idea, and then because I end up in these thousands of conversations, I'm like, you know, you should talk to this person.
You're the connector.
And you're seeing this happen. It's like the Regina Street team that's coming out. So Community Safety Patrol, partnering with the Comeback Society, that was announced during budget. So the Comeback Society is an Indigenous cultural organization who does street outreach. We've got the Community Safety Patrol downtown. They're marrying up, and they're going 24/7. And so you've got more connections to services, more relationships, more care being given and outreach. And so there's an example of, it's like, well, you should talk to these people. You should totally. And so the university, we go, hey city, you should talk to PTRC and the University of Regina about geothermal. And so you can start to see it sort of happen, or it's coming to fruition. And I think we're just going to get more of that because we are way better. We are way bigger when we do things in collaborative fashion. 100%.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I wish you the best of luck with your upcoming election.
Yeah.
And if you need anybody to help, I'm here.
Thanks, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. Take care out there, guys. Bye.